Hi, Randy Kay here. We all go through struggles at times, and I want to share with you through stories and insights and interviews with others how much God loves you. He loves you immensely, and that's what I hope you will hear through our interviews and what we have to share with you. Thanks for staying tuned. Here we go. Beloved of the Lord, get your tissues out for this one. This account is going to touch your heart in such a profound way. My guest today is what I would term a modern day Job person. Abby Wyrick went through a life of suffering, and she lived at the early years of her life what one would term a double life. That led to an account that placed her into a space of spiritual warfare, in which she actually heard the Spirit of God in conflict with the spirit or the person of Satan and his minions. We call this spiritual warfare. But it was such like Job, where there was a space that there was this battle going on, that our guest was saved by God, but there was suffering following that in a way that will touch your heart. So, without going any further, I want to introduce our wonderful guest. She is a certified licensed mental health counselor. She has multiple degrees, and she needed it because mental health illness entered into her own family. So, Abby, it's great to have you with us today.
Hi, Randy. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. And you are doing profoundly well, given the fact of what you've gone through. My goodness. So when you, in your growing up years, there were some challenges, led to this double life, good student, and then drugs. And tell us about that, of this double life that was going on, of the person that people thought you were versus the person that you actually were.
Yeah. So much going into that because you would think on the outside, I come here and it's like, well, once I start speaking and sharing these things, people don't believe it. They're like, I don't understand how you went through that. And because I got really good at hiding it, I got really good at reading a room and knowing how I needed to be and what was required of me to appear successful. But in the meantime, having all, the anxiety and the sadness, feeling alone, feeling that I didn't fit in, even from an early age, being called sensitive, that I needed to toughen up. But I always felt now God has shown me that He gave me this heart for people. But those kind of people, the ones that are sensitive and have those hearts from an early age, tend to be the ones that the bullies and people like hone in on and pick on. And so that probably from third, fourth grade on, until I learned, not in a good way, but I learned how to use my appearance, or I learned how to use what the world was looking for to my advantage, to get people off my back and get things that I thought that I needed, which weren't true because I needed God.
Mm. So you had this conundrum that was happening in your own life.
Mm-hmm.
You're being bullied. You dove into your studies. So
Yes.
you were getting good grades at the same time, kind of compensating against what was on the world on the outside there.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about how kind of drugs entered into the mix and how that changed things. Because if somebody were to see you at that time, they would think, oh, this is a straight A student. This is a
Yeah.
smart young lady, and she hasn't a care in the world.
Yeah. I mean, so even from elementary going into middle school, things still, I weren't into the drugs then, but I was like honor roll, student government, all of those things that would appear, like you said, this is, a great student on the way to great success. But again, puberty hits, the hormones hit, you have that desire to be liked and wanted or needed. And so, the interest in boys started probably around 13. And then, I was a little heavier then, just picked on by a lot of the girls because I didn't, act the way they did. I didn't look the way they did. So I was just trying so hard to fit in wherever I could. And then, boys were attentive just to get things that they wanted. So once I hit 14, we moved to a different home. While we were waiting for a home to get built, we moved to a different area, started high school. So I was able to kind of reinvent myself with new people. So still getting the great grades, but then getting the great grades wasn't cool. Like that wasn't really what people were looking for, at least on the outside. So I would actually like dumb myself down. I started to dumb myself down. Started getting into in-school suspension, things like that. And this was ninth grade. So much so that my parents did recognize that this was, off for them, but they never really asked me what was going on. Not that I feel they didn't want to know. I just don't think that they knew how to ask that. We definitely didn't have God in our life. I was never going to church then. So it wasn't even an element of, where's God in here? So I was always good at softball as well. So softball and grades, always good with those. So I actually got a scholarship to go to a Catholic private school. They thought, okay, we'll just put her there, not for religion, but she plays sports. She has a scholarship. My parents couldn't afford to just send me to a private school, but I was able to do that. So I came in again. So I transferred out from ninth grade, came in 10th grade. And so I was the cool kid coming from this other school that got in trouble to all these kids that grew up in this Catholic program. So again, though, still had the grades, wanted to fit in. I remember the first semester that they did honor roll and called out grades, and they called me out for getting all A's. Literally, you heard everybody in there like, ah, because I came in with the bleach blonde hair and the little backpack, the surfer girl that, was all talk, but wasn't really doing anything wrong. And so then I'm like, oh, they're noticing me for that, but not for a good way. And then that's where people introduced me to marijuana. So I would smoke, but I was still getting the grades, still doing the softball. So it's like I was able to hide all these elements. But also I lost my virginity at the age of 14. And looking back, I'm like, that's a baby. That's a child. But at that age, you don't know. Nobody's telling you or teaching you any different. But I learned that I was able to look all of a sudden, my looks that came into play. I wasn't overweight anymore. So I was longing again to fit in. And so the alcohol came into the picture. Hiding it again, my parents had no idea. Teachers had no idea. That's also where I learned there's a religion class. So I started reading and learning about God. I got, the Bible, and I didn't understand it. I read the word, but it never sunk in because to me, I was studying it for the grades. And I might be jumping around a little bit here, but I remember, I won't say the school I went to, but my first religion teacher also noticed me, but not for the right reasons, and would actually come to some of my softball games and then send me notes to get me out of class. He was married. Nothing ever happened, thank God. But so then my warped idea of here I was seeking, validation and attention from this person who was teaching me about God. And then it was twisted into something to where, how could I trust somebody talking to me about God if that's all they're wanting from me is a sexual element? Yeah. So I totally forgot about that until we started talking about it just now, how much that must have impacted me and my relationship with God later.
Well, you were looking for a savior, literally speaking, with the Bible, and here you had a representative, a so-called representative of God, the teacher who was had ill intentions toward you. So this must have sullied your idea of God. Where was God in the mix of all of these things when the drugs were entering in? You were young and being kind of you were being taken advantage of. And so this was a spiral down. At the same time this was going on, were you able to continue this life of studying and being the perfect kind of straight A student and model
Right?
citizen?
Yeah. Occasionally I'd get a B, but that's okay. Work through that. But yeah, I did. So I was still a star on the softball team. We won the district championship. I actually did become president of student government my junior year. But again, to me, it was just all about those accolades. It wasn't about that I really wanted to make changes. To me, it's like, well, maybe this will make, people like me. Maybe this will make me worthy. So yeah, I still had the complete double life.
Mm.
Hmm.
That must have been awfully difficult because you couldn't be your true self.
I was never
And
my
you were
true self.
searching for that true self. So where was that in the, that as a young person, especially not having a mature mind,
Right.
not being able to process good from evil in a way that a mature adult would be able to do. The drugs are entering in. You have the ability to persevere through the drugs to still focus and all of those other things.
Yeah.
So what was this leading up to in this young lady's life that kind of then this search for God versus the search for kind of attention in a positive way? What kind of led up to that culmination that got you to the point where you were headed toward a near fatal, if not a fatal, result?
Right. So I did graduate high school, and so going off to college. Um, Going off to college away from home, young, because I was always young in school. So going off, I was 18 years old, leaving home, going to an environment in Central Florida, a school that the majority of the students were very wealthy, came from wealthy families. We did not. But that's something that I wanted to go to. I think again, it was like, well, maybe if I aspire to this appearance of, right? So in my mind, looking back now, that may have been a core element. And I was daddy's little girl. And so what I wanted, I asked, and usually I'd be given. So there's elements with that as well that um, I look back at now when we talk more as my life progresses. I see these core connections between myself and my daughter. So I just want to kind of put that there. I'm like, God is revealing so much to me about that longing for a father and the figure in God. But at college, things started out what I would say was fine in classes. But then I went to go out for sorority, for Rush, right? I was crushed because I was not that model of what they were looking for those primary sororities. Didn't have the money, didn't have the looks of what these girls did. But the one sorority that I did fit in with was one, it was called non-compos mentis, which means not of sound mind. So it's where all the, let's say, free spirits ended up, or those that weren't necessarily accepted into the other ones. So in that, searching again for that fitting in and longing, I was what I believe date raped while on campus. I did go and speak to the administrators after that, but again, it was, where's the proof? You were with them. So, I mean, so I felt like even speaking up at that point, still only 18, not believed that, well, I just have to suck it up, and just to be tough. So in that's when some of these other friends that I made on campus that didn't quite fit the mold either invited me to try ecstasy for the first time. And I had no fears or doubts about it. I mean, maybe I did, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I hadn't tried anything. Like the worst that I had done was marijuana and alcohol prior to that. But not only taking the ecstasy, but going to like these underground clubs and these dance parties and different things in like the mid 90s here in Central Florida. But when I took it, they called it the love drug. And made me feel like invincible. I was like running around like a little social butterfly, having fun, and the energy, and people were like loved me and were wanted to be my friend. And so all of these people, though, even then, like, where were the other college students there? All of these people that I would meet in these underground parties and clubs, many of them were either homeless, on drugs for a long time, didn't have families that loved them or cared for them. But then there was me. My family had no idea any of the stuff going on. I was in college. I was getting good grades. Like, I was like, to me, it's like, oh, well, I'm not like them. This is me just dabbling. And so that's how it started.
Mm. The expectation, I think, that normally would occur for what happened. By the way, what happened to you in being raped, being accosted, and it being blamed on you as not what it was, the horrific imposition, that happens today, and that's something that we'll get to a little bit later. But it's interesting, Abby, that you bring up your daughter, because she had some parallels to your own life. By the way, we're going to get to a tragedy within Abby's family. We're not there yet. That is going to cause you to have to get out those tissues, because there's something that's going to happen to Abby's daughter later on, after she gets married, and so we're going to get there. But for now, where we are, you as a young lady in a sorority that is intended for those who have been rejected by the mainstream sororities, that is something that places you in a position now of relying on drugs.
Yeah.
And so you're typically with drugs leading to the greater high, or you develop an immunity or something to that effect. And so you're in this position now where the drugs are taking possession of you and your life.
But I was not willing to say that was true. Like, for me, because people tried to warn me. I do look back now, and like, God sent people that try to talk to me and say, like, they would draw me pictures of like a sinking boat and say that, like, they're trying to tell me I was the sinking boat. I'm like, you're crazy. I'm having fun. I'm doing school. Everything's fine. I don't know how I ever made it to all my classes. I don't know how I got the grades that I did. I mean, only by the grace of God, because it went from occasionally, like maybe once a month, going to these clubs, trying ecstasy, to becoming weekly, to becoming multiple times during the week, to, having boyfriends come and stay with me in my college dorm, my boyfriend, that were all part of this other scene, right? That they were like, oh, we'll come stay on campus with you. So people were trying to tell me, but I just didn't see it. And I just look back at how God was always with me. I know he was, even when I didn't know him, from protecting me from so many things. I would see people die in front of me at these rave scenes. And then people would pass out, and then I would like just kind of touch them and bring them up, which I believe God's given me a gift of healing that I didn't know. I mean, now I know it, but then at the time, because people would rise from the ground and then they looked at me, they would call me an angel. And again, this is me now, probably at about 19. I didn't understand what any of that meant. I just thought, oh, cool, I'm making new friends and I'm bubbling around the club. And people, I rarely had to pay for drugs. People would just give them to me. So I thought, oh, look, that's nice. I don't even have to pay for it because it gets expensive. But what would happen is they would be using me because everybody liked me. And so the drug dealers would give me drugs to put on me to bring into the club. So then if I was able to hook people up, so then here I'm basically dealing drugs without realizing I'm doing it, but I was. And then they'd get the money and I'd get the free pills.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you were, you weren't a drug dealer, but you were you unwittingly became one in bringing these drugs in. Now you
and
had
causing other people to then, and so that I've had to work through that too, because I let a lot of people, the enemy used me to lead others astray as well.
Wow. So you had what I find fascinating, Abby, that when you were younger as a girl, you were seeking after God. You had this person who had violated that trust as a teacher or pastor, what have you,
Mm-hmm.
uh, in helping you in that growth when he really wasn't. So he was a hypocrite, and so you had that, and then you had this impartation of this what seemed to be a gift of healing with others. But
Mm-hmm.
that healing, that gift of healing, wouldn't work for you when you had your turn to be on that side of having that drug overdose. And so you
Mm-hmm.
had gotten to the point now where you are taking drugs and you would ultimately suffer that overdose, and there was nobody to heal you at that point except one
Mm-hmm.
person,
Yeah.
one amazingly person that we know as God, the God of Jesus Christ. So tell us
Yeah.
how it led up to that point.
Yeah. At that point, I had to transfer from that one college. So even prior to that, to back up a little bit, I had to leave the college that I was at because I would say, I don't want to call it a mental breakdown or whatever it was, but I did have an experience that included probably too much LSD, just various drugs, to where I actually went on the phone and I was calling the operator asking how to get in touch with God. So that was when I was 19. And so this was still at that prestigious college. And then looking around my room at all this stuff, and like nobody could answer where was God. And so basically the operator, this is how God works too, was like, can you tell me your parents' name? Let me find their number. Let me call your parents for you. Because I couldn't even think in my head at that point to call my parents because they don't know what's happening. They have no idea. The operators doesn't know how to tell me how to get in touch with God. But so they were able to somehow connect me with my parents. And then in that state, I told them what was going on. So they pulled me out of that college, brought me home. Maybe it was during Christmas break, and then sent me back up to the same area, but though to a larger campus. So let's just put her in a new environment. Maybe all will be better, but never really addressing all that just happened. They didn't know.
Hmm.
Like they didn't know, and they did the best they could with what they had. So I just want to make sure I say that. I don't blame them. But I was so needing somebody to step in and say, you do not need to be doing this. What's wrong? And to get me help. And then I was also like, well, if I'm fine, just send me here. I'll be okay. So I thought starting over and fresh in a new college, but still, 30 minutes from the one I was just at, I won't go out anymore. I just won't see those people. But it's not that easy when you develop this lifestyle to where you're all of a sudden loved and accepted and wanted by these people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so soon I was right back in it. And
Mm.
of course, they say when you clean something up, if you don't fill it with the right stuff, like more comes back. We're talking like now looking at the Bible. So whatever I was trying to just push away for a little bit, I still wasn't filling that space with God. I was still seeking that attention. So in this new college, in this new environment, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I'm going to share it because I feel that this could really resonate with some people. Someone introduced me to how I would be able to make some money if I looked into being a waitress at an adult entertainment industry. And that's how they start. They tell you to come in as a waitress.
Mm.
So, of course, it starts that way. And then that's where more of the stronger drugs started being introduced, and all the money that could be made, and all the power and the fame and whatever else they claim will come with that in an environment with all these wounded souls. But again, here I am, the college student. Well, that's not me. I'm not here for that. It's just fun for me. But that spiraled into more of that double life experience, but I couldn't keep it separate anymore. It was really wearing on me. And that also led to being in situations to where boyfriends, people, whoever I was with at the time, many of them were drug dealers. They would get caught. And I was with them. And looking back, I don't know how I wasn't like arrested and like all this different stuff happened, but God always had his hand. But it's like I never woke up. I wasn't hearing him. Even to the point where one night I just went off, I made some new friends. It was like an after party, like come with us. So I get in this car with strangers. We go to this hotel room. I see on the table like all these pills there. Nobody's looking at them. So I'm like, I'm going to take them. They were ecstasy pills. So I took them. The person's hotel room realized that they were gone, but nobody was owning up to it. So I just leave, and I leave with these people. So all of a sudden, these people that were my friends, I thought, not really. All of a sudden, they start screaming and yelling at me, telling me that I needed to give them back, and or they're going to go give me back to the drug dealer. And this was like broad daylight at this point. Probably at this age, I'm probably 20, 19, 20, where they start punching me. And I just I couldn't feel anything. They were punching me. But these are two girls too, like really like tough girls punching me. And then took me down this back alleyway. And I went to try to jump out of the car. And as I jump out of the car stops and my ankle is stuck under the tire. And I'm screaming for help. And there's people that are down the street, and this is happening. They're like seeing me, and I'm screaming for help. And not that it's a color thing or a skin color thing, but it was in an environment to where I probably stood out. It's different, where I was in this back alleyway. So they looked at me, the people that were down the street, and they weren't even coming to help me, as these people were pounding my face, and my ankle is under a car and I can't get out. Oh. When all of a sudden, this police car shows up. And I can't even tell you where the police car came, but this man comes out, and I don't know how he gets me out from underneath the car. I don't know how I didn't have a broken ankle, but he just picks me up and he looks at me and he holds, like, he buttons up my shirt and he says, "You don't belong here. You don't belong here." And then I told him, "But there's drugs in my purse. It's in the car." He said, "Don't worry about that." So between that time, he's telling me that I don't belong there. And then he goes, and I don't know if he writes up, I don't think it was a real police officer. I think it was an angel, because I can't even explain the situation. But he wrote up the report that the drugs were in the car, not in my purse. So he just cleaned me up. He says, "Where can I take you?" Takes me in this car, takes me to my car that was at the club from the night before. And you would think that that would wake me up. He says, "You need to go home." Did I listen? No. So I have a broken nose at this point. I didn't even look at myself in the mirror yet, but I go off to the next after party to go get high. But God just sent me an angel. I believe that I could have been killed there.
Yeah, you were definitely saved.
Yeah.
And that's not the typical response for a police officer that comes in for a drug possession case. Definitely. You had mercy and grace there. And you had this spiritual warfare going on there, where the enemy, that is Satan and his minions, are out to bring you to a point of death, so that they can send you to the utter darkness, where they abide. So you've got that going on, bring you deeper, deeper, deeper into drugs and ultimately death. At the same time, God has his hands on you, obviously. Right. He sends you probably an angel in disguise as an officer. He's with you and saving you from what would be invariably death. And there's spiritual warfare going on with you, but you were making choices at the same time that would deny what God had desired for you in favor of what the drugs were compelling you to do.
Yeah, kept going back to the drugs. But I always had, I guess I want to say this here. My heart, he always gave me this really special, warm heart. Like right now, I feel it hot. So whenever I feel his presence, it gets really hot and warm. So he always, that's why from childhood, that sensitivity, when I was told I was too, don't be so sensitive, and why do you care? Like I could feel what other people were feeling. So it's like, even in all that, it's like, I always wanted to do better. I wanted to do the right thing. I genuinely cared about people. I never cared about myself. I didn't see myself as worthy or valuable or special. I never saw myself as that, but he did.
Well, you
And
had
the
one.
enemy was after me a lot. Like, so I guess also I could see even like on the drugs, off the drugs. I know we still haven't even gotten to that one day that I told you about my experience, because I think I've had so many experiences, I just didn't know what to call them. Um, but I would see, like out at the clubs, I could see the evil. And I didn't know to distinguish if it was the person or a spirit. I now understand that spirits can inhabit bodies, and there are battles not against flesh and blood, but it sure comes up in the flesh and blood. But I would be able to sense that, and the demons and the evil. It's like I could hear them, like drugs, addiction, pornography. Like I knew what their role was, and even though I would know what the role was, again, I'm not a believer yet. Like it's like I was drawn to them. You would think that would make me go the opposite way, but I was like drawn to them. Like, oh, I don't know if I thought I could overcome it or if it could, or the enemy was in my ear telling me, oh, that's not going to touch you. You could have power. You can see these things. But I wasn't looking for that power. I don't know why I was just so drawn. Again, the drugs were so intoxicating, and that I felt that made me feel special and unique, I guess, that I could see these things. And you don't really talk with other people about seeing these things because they're going to say you're crazy. And here I am studying psychology, still in school, getting good grades, by the way. So again, this whole double life is still happening in the midst of all this, which I still am blown away by, which I know that that's why I'm here talking with you today. And hopefully if one soul hears this and they're like, wow, that God loves, loves them so much that he is going to keep after them and keep after them and keep after them. And the enemy is not going to back off, but he will once you get that power of Jesus with you.
Yeah, nobody is beyond God's love
No.
and redemption. Not a single person living on the earth. But there's there's misunderstanding sometimes, I think, that we know the gifts of the Spirit, as Paul spoke about in Corinthians, the book of Corinthians in the Bible. But he said that if you don't have love, and the author of love is God, they're like clanging cymbals. I mean, you can have all of these gifts, all of these special abilities, if you will, but if you don't have God's love, it means nothing. It means nothing. And at that point, you are physiologically, your body has changed to dependence upon the drug.
Yeah.
Psychologically, you've got this feeling of rejection.
Yeah.
And spiritually speaking, you're kind of caught in between now. And God is kind of leading you, has to lead you to this place where he can find you. But it's going to be in a dark place. It's going to be in a dark place that leads you to that. And oftentimes, those of us who have had these experiences, we've gone through sickness and death. Mm-hmm. That's sometimes where it has to go in order to be saved. And that was apparently the case with you and the real world, which is the world that is in the spiritual realm.
When you were saying that about him having to find ways to get to me and get my attention, I was reminded while I was living in an apartment, and I was 20 now at this point. We're getting closer. But he sent a nun to me. I was high as a kite. I'm only laughing because this is who I am. That high as a kite from the night before, I've got marijuana out on tables, and a nun comes knocking at my door. And it's like, I'm not even in like a front apartment. This is like a back apartment. I don't have a roommate there at the time. So a nun is knocking on my door. And I'm like, and again, I remember coming from the Catholic background, right? Sister Grace I had back then. So I thought of that. So I opened the door. I mean, who opens the door? Who opens the door? They look through the little peephole and see a nun high as a kite. But here I am, and I'm welcoming this nun into my apartment. And this nun comes in and she's sitting down and she just starts sharing with me about the love of God. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry for the mess, trying to clean up. But she didn't even look at any of that. She was just sharing that God loved me, And so I don't recall all that she was saying, but it just strikes me that, like, who does that? But God sent me a nun and so, but again, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. But he still kept doing it, probably more than I realized. And there's probably more angels that he sent me. Maybe the angel was the nun. I have no idea that that's how I could receive it. But I have a feeling that there's been a lot more experiences because I always sensed that I would see more of the demons and the evil. I don't think, and I've been praying lately in my walk with God now, I want to see the angels. I want to see like the good and the positive too, to help strengthen me so that I can keep fighting the battle for him. But coming up on that 21. So here I am now into my 21st year. Still psychology, still doing all my school, not missing a beat. Don't know how, God's grace, doing that. Basically feeling on top of the world. I looked cute. People liked me. They wanted to be around me. I was making good money. Which I didn't even need to be making money because my parents were paying for all of my school in my apartment, but it was nice to have that, on top of the world per se, thinking I had it all together, right? So then leading up to that, and Christmas and New Year's and all the holidays and Halloween all have this real significant spiritual meaning for me. So I say that because looking back now, he was still even trying to get my attention around the Halloween time that I was 21, because I would go into a club and like I would notice like people would have like an angel costume on and a devil costume. And it's like there was always angels and devils, but literally like Halloween costume. And so I kept being drawn to the devils. I was drawn to the devils. I would like literally go and say, oh yeah, I'll have another drink. And then the bartender would give me free drinks and the bartender had the devil costume on. Right. And so I was choosing that. And again, it goes back to that, like God kind of woos us, but we ultimately have that free will and that choice. And he's a gentleman and he doesn't bombard, but he sure as heck tries to get our attention. But it didn't. So let's just say from Halloween that year leading up to Christmas, and I think I don't even know if I went home because I would always go home to see my family during holidays. I probably did. And I probably looked a mess. I know I lost a lot of weight from the drugs. Definitely was dressing more provocatively. It was definitely noticeable, but I don't think my parents really knew, again, how to have those conversations or to say, are you okay? So I came right back from Christmas break up to college. Then we're coming into like New Year's, right? So I go out for New Year's Eve with these so-called friends that I have. And I honestly, and this blows my mind that I'm not forever physically altered. I believe he's healed me so significantly. But it wouldn't be so out of the realm of possibility for me to take like 14 pills in a night. Ecstasy, Rohypnol, which was the roofie, the date rape drug, also whatever, Xanax. I mean, I would just take them. I'd smoke weed. I just would try anything that anybody would give me. And then this New Year's Eve at this house party with my so-called friend, who also used me because she would rely on me to be able to get out the word of the drugs that she had to sell. And then I would get my free drugs. But she got a hold of a chemical, like a basically medical grade nitrous oxide tank, like you would get at the dentist. So not like the little whippets that's a whole other story. I would do those. It basically kills your brain cells. But this is the stuff that dentists use to put you under, and balloons. And I would do so many of those balloons. So whatever, if I did cocaine that night, if I did 14 pills of ecstasy that night, acid that night, you'd think that was enough. But no, like I was drawn to these nitrous oxide, these whippets. I was doing those. And I think that in that moment, I was in this house and I did that. And then things shifted. All of a sudden, this so-called friend turned on me and was like kind of coming at me, I believe now, demonically. And then in my mind, like whatever she was saying was like in some other language. I didn't understand this language I was hearing. And then I go into a bathroom and I'm looking in the mirror, like what is happening? I start speaking some other language. I don't understand what's coming out of my mouth. And then that's when I heard that still small voice. It's okay, Abby. I know you're really tired. Just rest. Just go on outside. And so at this point, we're beyond, it's New Year's Day now, and the sun is up. People are going to be coming over to this house for this party. I am then going outside and I hear this voice telling me, just lay down. So I'm in this little party dress from the night before with no shoes on, and I'm laying in the dirt, basically the dirt in the front lawn of this house. Not broad daylight yet, but it was definitely starting to pop up. And hearing this voice, and it was so calm and soothing. And I'm like, okay, and so my breath is starting to slow and I'm feeling what I thought was peace. And I'm laying there with my eyes closed. And then I start hearing this other voice. And I'm like, what's going on? Basically, no, get up. You need to fight. And I'm like, now I think I'm really losing it, right? And then at this point, people start coming to this house party. Nobody stops to ask how I am. And as I'm looking at all these people that are showing up at this house, I'm like, these are all these people that I've partied and done drugs with for 4 years. So I know these people. So I'm like, what? Not one person is stopping to ask. It's kind of like when they walked by, they were like, we got her. That's what I felt. Like, we got her. Like this whole thing was a setup for my soul to be taken that day. And then that's when I shared with you earlier what I started to hear. I didn't understand at the time because I was starting to hear some growling, some gnashing of teeth. And then I started hearing these different voices. I felt like I couldn't see it, but I heard it like there was some courtroom. And now I understand it to be the enemy, the accuser of my soul. Look what she's done. Look at all these drugs and all these things, basically all my sins, all of the wrongs that I've done. And now I believe God the Father, like basically, well, it's true, and then something about like, I was likened to like a tree in the branches and that I had no good fruit and that the tree was supposed to be burned down. And then all of a sudden I hear a third voice come in. And then I hear it sounded also like a soothing voice, but one with authority, which I now believe to be Jesus. And basically saying, give me time with this one. Let me prune these branches. Give her 1 year. Let me tend to these branches and work on this soil. And basically God the Father said, okay, you have 1 year. And that's when I stood up. And I started walking basically in this horrible area of town with no shoes on, just like looking up, trying to figure out what just happened. I don't understand. And then I didn't understand what I started to see. So I started to see like a movie and it was very quick. It was very fast. It's like my whole life. I saw my life flash before me. And it's like I saw going back to childhood, like all the chances all the times that God was trying to reach me, all the chances I turned my back. All the different things and the drugs that I did and all that, everything that led up to this day. So that's where, when we spoke earlier, remember coming from the only religion or thing that I knew was Catholic school. And so I like, is this purgatory? I didn't know what this meant. I'm like, okay, so what do I do? Obviously I'm lacking. I'm not in a spot where I feel I'm going to go to heaven, but I'm walking around. Am I alive? Why is nobody helping me? Do they see me? Am I really even walking around? So all of this is going on in my head. But I felt like I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep walking. If I keep walking, then there's got to be a chance to redeem myself. So I end up at a McDonald's. I walk into the McDonald's and I must have looked I had the little dress on. I thought that I still looked cute, but I guess I looked a little messy and no shoes on. So they're looking at me like, we can't help you here. Because I was asking to call somebody, can I use your phone to help? They turned me away. So I leave the McDonald's, I walk across the street to a convenience store. So I walk into the convenience store. So again, remember I told you, like, I'm starting now to see, because now people who weren't looking at me before, now certain people were looking at me, but I could see darkness around them. And it's like, I asked for help. I asked for the phone, like they shut the doors of this convenience store. I felt like everything was closing in on me. I don't know how, and I ended up being able to use a phone. They didn't have cell phones back then. But I somehow got a hold of somebody. I don't know how that happened. Again, God was helping me. I didn't know. They had my car from the night before that wasn't even at this party I was at. So this person had my car. And so I was like, okay, so I walk outside and this woman comes up to me and it says, you look hungry. You need to eat. And I'm like, but I didn't feel it was a safe thing. This was not a safe. I said, I'm fine. So I just sat down in the parking lot and I just looked up and I was like, God, Please help me. I don't understand what's happening. And then the person showed up with the car. So I get in the car and then they take me to the house. They go in and get my shoes for me. They drive me to my apartment. I had not been in my apartment for like almost 24 hours now. As I walk in, I smell fire everywhere. There was no fire, but I smelled fire. I smelled sulfur. I smelled like a dead, like it just smelled dead. I had a cat there, so the cat was fine, but I was so scared. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you okay? I see drugs everywhere. I start to take all the drugs. I start flushing them down the toilet. I start throwing them away. I start pounding on this guy that just brought me back to my apartment. Tell me about God. What do you know about God? And he had no idea. He's like, I don't know how to help you. Like, he's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, okay, then you need to leave. So he leaves. And so forgive me, God, for this. But this is the part where I remembered I had stolen a Bible from the first prestigious college that I went to for a religion class. And you know what? I held on to that Bible and I knew exactly where to go to find it. And it wasn't even an easy place. It was like in this locker that I used as a stand for my TV. So I found the Bible and all I remembered from Catholic private school was the 10 Commandments. So I'm looking up, where are the 10 Commandments? So I'm like looking over them and I'm like, man, this is really bad. I'm really going to hell because I broke all of the commandments. And I didn't know. I mean, this is an Old Testament. I didn't know. I'm like, how am I supposed to, but why am I still alive? You know, what's going on? Again, so this is during that winter break. So I had no college at this time, but I'm home. So I start thinking, well, I have to earn my way. So I start calling my family, saying goodbye to them. They didn't know what was going on. Nobody said, why are you saying this? I start giving away my personal items, thinking maybe if I give stuff away, you know, I can earn my way. And again, let's go back to being a good student. So I get out my journals and I'm going to study my way into heaven. So I start watching all those religion channels, and I'm taking notes. I still have these journals. I'm taking notes, all this stuff about God, but nothing was penetrating me, nothing. And I wasn't sleeping. It probably had been a good 7 to 10 days now. I wasn't sleeping well. I was having nightmares. I was now not doing any drugs, right? So this is me still in this state of perpetual hell, not taking any drugs. Nobody's calling me to check on me. So all these people I thought were my friends, nobody's checking on me. And then one day somebody said the word Jesus. And I'm like, it can't be that easy, right? I'm like, so it wasn't that I was like, okay, God, I love you. It was more, I was so fed up. I was exhausted. I was tired that I just screamed out. And I'm like, you need to prove this to me. I'm going to believe this. Okay, Jesus, I'm going to believe that you're the Son of God and that you died for my sins. And that if I believe in you and I put my life in your hands, because it's not going so good right now, that you can save me. And it was more like out of defiance, like, prove it to me. I'm sick. I'm tired. I'm done. I'm over this. And once I prayed that, it's like I felt this heat, this warmth just pour down over my body from head to toe. It was better than any high I ever had. And it's like in an instant, it's like he did this healing in me that I never had to go to drug rehab. You know, I never had to seek help. He just plucked me. It's like, finally you surrendered. Finally you turned to me. And then just plucked me out of that. And all these people never contacted me again. I'd love to say it's just, that's great. Okay, wonderful. Life is wonderful. Here I am, 21. It definitely was the turning point for me. I know this probably is a good break because I'm sure you had some questions, but at that point, I belonged to God. I was saved. Jesus saved me.
Well, I'd like to say that was your destiny, but you had choices to make along the way, didn't you? I mean, it wasn't something where God could say, okay, this one is going to be saved. Was Jesus had petitioned the Father in this dynamic that oftentimes confuses us, but it really isn't strange. And I've talked about this often, about the dynamic between the Holy Spirit, the Father, and the Son, Jesus, that is. But there's Jesus knowing your heart.
Yeah.
And your heart seeks the truth. And that's John 8:32, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So you wanted that. You were seeking the 10 commandments and all of those, and those were convicting you, not saving you.
No.
It had to be the person of Jesus Christ. But you were on the road, Abby, through this, not to a Pollyannish life, one that would be free and clear. And, the rest of the story is a Hollywood production where, we have a Brady Bunch type family and all of that. That's not where you were headed. I mean, there were trials in the future, even though you were saved. That is, you
Oh,
were in Christ. The road wasn't going to be easy for you.
no, no. And like I'm crying, not because I feel like remember I told you I get hot in my heart. And so I feel his presence with me right now. And it's really strong.
Mm. We feel it with you, Abby, and you know where you're going in
Yeah.
this. And you had a family, and
Yeah.
you're um, minus a daughter and a husband in a way that is almost incomprehensible. But I
Yeah.
saw some pictures were showing of your daughter a little later.
Yeah.
She looks so much like you.
Yeah.
And you met a man. Everybody goes into a relationship thinking that, if they marry this person, that they're going to have a wonderful life. And it didn't work out that way.
No.
And you were studying at this time, and you were eventually multiple licenses and certifications in mental illness.
Yeah.
And you're going to be introduced to this in a profound way. There are a lot of people that are watching this right now who have lost loved ones who suffer from mental illness or know somebody who suffered from mental illness, who have questioned, where's God in all this? And now you are saved. That is, Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And still, now you're headed into the Job type account. Job is the poster boy, if you will, and maybe you're the poster person for our current day and age. But Job, should have been destined for a good life. He had honored the Lord, and you had honored the Lord, but that wasn't the case. And so where we're going with this is this conundrum of why bad things happen to good people, or God's people at least.
Yeah.
So you're on that road now. You're entering into what you hope will be a life now free of
Yeah.
drugs, and then free of some of the trials and tribulations that you experienced previously. But it wasn't that way, was it?
No. No. So here I was 21, saved, finishing out my college, um, moving into a better environment with a family, just renting a room, to finish off my degree. And it was, great, all appearances, right? I'm going to have my degree. I'm going to get my bachelor's in psychology. I can start my life. I'm a believer. I'm no longer doing drugs. I'm not drinking. I'm not doing any of those behaviors. Life is good. And then I soon realized you can't really do any type of therapy or counseling with just your bachelor's. So I got a little discouraged with that. I would take odds and end jobs just to kind of earn some money and make money. And so that'll be where I start working for a business to business marketing company, where I would ultimately meet my first husband, who would be the father of the two children that I would have. So in that place, in that space, meeting him and, somebody genuinely interested in me, asking me on like a real date, never trying to be physical with me, telling me I'm the kind of girl that you take home to meet your parents. Nobody ever said that to me. So remember as a child and then seeking those relationships and desiring to be loved, I'm like, wow, look, I turned my life to God. He's giving me my prince. Somebody who will love me and not want me just for my physical body, but is truly genuinely interested in my heart and wants me to meet his parents. And then ultimately asks me to marry him. And we were not intimate before our marriage. I felt that God redeemed spiritually, my virginity for me, that I was a new creation in him. So I'm like, everything's great, right? So you would think, okay, we're getting ready. I have the invitation sent out. I have the dress. Um, but looking back, I believe that God was kind of giving me some signs. It says pause, but I wasn't listening because, I admit I'm a little stubborn. So basically some of my soon to be husband's concerns and issues that he never really shared with me is he struggled very much with mental illness and bipolar, and it was undiagnosed. Prior to us getting married, at least that I was aware of, was his first, what I'd say, mental breakdown or crisis event, where he checked himself into a Baker Act, what they call in Florida, like for mental health. So where if you're going to harm yourself, you can go and voluntarily check yourself in. So I'm like, what? We have this dream about to happen. We're going to get married. I don't understand why you're going to a hospital, and then it started to come out that he had scars on his wrists from when he was a teenager and tried to commit suicide. And so, like, why didn't he tell me this before? Why didn't his parents? Why does nobody talk about this? But again, here I am with my bachelor's degree, right? Thinking I know it all now, psychology. I can fix him, right? Because, remember, God gives me this ability to heal. I think healing not only physically, but God gives us healing to help people emotionally. So I'm like, okay, God, let's use this gift. We can heal him. Like I thought, just love him more. It'll make it better. So he did end up coming out of the hospital, and it would get good and go well. We got married. Things seemed to be magical. Our honeymoon, and then just kind of starting life together. Found out that I was pregnant, with my first child, my daughter. So I'm like, great, we're going to have a baby, all that. And then, like, during the pregnancy, he started to show signs of depression again. So I think it was always there. It was like in bipolar type 2. So there's different types, but with that, it's kind of like a constant like anxiety and depression, not really the significant, like it wasn't so noticeable. And what I look back now, it was kind of like a chameleon, kind of how I had a double life. He kind of had one. Chameleon. He became what people needed them to be or act like. And I think that comment of I'm the type of girl you bring home to meet your parents. I don't know what other stuff he may have struggled with that I still won't know until maybe I see him again in heaven, which we'll get to that. But he didn't know who he was. So here he didn't know who he was. I was just trying to figure out who I am. He was going to church with me, but didn't really have that relationship like how I had. So after my daughter was born, he was back in the hospital again. So I was a brand new mom with a baby and a husband that I felt at the time was choosing to not help, and that he'd rather go be in a mental health hospital and die rather than be with me and our newborn baby. But I had to hold it all together because that's what I do, because I'm strong and resilient. I'm okay. We'll be fine. Let me just keep loving on him and get him home. So it was kind of that cycle. He'd come home, and then it wouldn't be that way. Like things seemed to be better, and then 9/11 happened. So I was home with my daughter when 9/11 happened. So it's like the world as we knew it, or that safety of what we thought, was going on. Like I look back now, and I was like very symbolic, not only for the world that we live in, but for this idea of what this world was that I created as my magical prince and princess. And we've got this little baby now, was coming to like destruction, and I couldn't hold it together.
This husband,
Yeah.
who was not as he seemed to be,
Yeah.
suffering from mental illness, and this daughter who turned out to be a beautiful young lady,
Yeah,
are not with you today.
they're both gone.
And they're both gone. So this life that you had entered into, which should have been part of that redemptive process of you having been saved, freed of drugs, freed of all of the things that were of the past life, apart from the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. All of these things should have, in a more, let's say, ideal world, or maybe we might even call it a just world, should have been behind you, and you were looking forward. But what you were looking forward to now was tragedy upon tragedy. Your life would still be troubled in an even perhaps greater way than it had been previously.
Yeah. It's like, I think I'm like, man, if I would have been shown all of what was going to happen back when I said, okay, Jesus, prove it to me. I don't
Mm.
like, I'd love to say I would have made all the right choices and say, but like that God in his sovereignty knows what we can handle in that moment. Right. And even with all that's happened, I won't trade it because I know where my loved ones are. And I know that he saved me for a reason. And I'm able to share my first husband's story. I'm able to share my daughter's story, and all for God's glory. Because these are things that typically people would just hush, right? And don't talk about it. Shame and guilt, because the enemy's been right there. Like, oh, look at you. You're supposed to be helping all these other families. You help save all these families, but you can't even save your own. I've heard that a lot from the enemy.
Well, shame on the enemy and those who listen to the enemy.
Right.
The voice of accusation.
Yeah.
The enemy is the accuser,
Yep.
and so shame on those who would shame those who are living a life trying to honor God and yet
Right.
suffering through this. And I have to share this, Abby, that I can empathize with you because we've gone through the same thing. I served on church boards, served in ministry, and yet we had this other life going on with, and I won't get into that, but I have to say, you are courageous, extraordinarily courageous. There's the people listening and watching this who are thinking that, they have to live up to a standard and they have to qualify to go into a church, or they have to somehow look a certain way or act a certain way or have a certain life in order to be accepted. And you're destroying that in favor of a true graces. And I'll end with this because I want to just highlight something you said. You said if you had known what you would go through, you would have done it over. And it's not like you're on the other side of it because you still have that empty space, that those thoughts, those pictures. It's just that this life is the workstation and heaven is home.
Yeah.
And your daughter's in heaven. And your former husband is in heaven too. So we're going to get to the tissue part here. Not only are they in heaven, but the way they left this world was almost unthinkable.
Yeah. So with my husband, my first husband, what you do when things don't work, and this, I laugh at this because why not just move? So we moved to a different city. Like after all this is happening, right? We moved to a different city. If we move to a different city, we go to a different church. We can start fresh. It kind of it goes back to like even like my parents, like, well, we'll just put her at another college. So it's like I think we think sometimes if we just change our environment, it'll be better. Like just go somewhere new and then start fresh. But if we don't deal with the core issue, and if we don't deal with that pain, it's just going to follow us and come out in different ways. So I believe we were attempting to do that with our first home And then I got pregnant again because, you know, why not? Another baby can help fix things, right? I'm sure there's other families out there that have thought the same thing. And I was so grateful though, because I wouldn't even trade that. So my beautiful daughter and now my beautiful son come into the picture, you know. And I thought, okay, great. I've got a boy and a girl, you know, my husband, he's there, he's holding on, but it's okay because we got this like perfect ideal life. And actually, as we lead up to sharing how my husband died, after he died, there was people in the neighborhood that came up and said, you guys had the perfect life. Like we saw you, you had like, you know, we didn't have any dog at that time, but basically like the picket fence and, you know, you had it all. Where did this come from? They didn't see behind the closed doors all the pain and the suffering that was going on because again, like I had that skill, I could hide it. I was good at being able to hold things together. Not really, but I thought that I was. But so my son at this point, he's about almost 3, my daughter 3 years older, so 6. That's when things started to spiral again with my husband, with the mental illness. And then he started to go into the mental hospital, check himself in more frequently. So before it would have been like once a year or like, you know, it hold off for a little bit, but now we started to get into a season to where it was like constant. And so, and then it became more where it wasn't just like you could get by. It was like a little depression, anxiety. He started to go to the extreme, like the manic and then the really low because he was on all these different medications. That's another thing. And the whole other topic is all these psychotropic medications that these doctors say, just try this. They don't even really ask you how you are. They just give these pills. So he's on all these different medications. It's not helping him. Switching from therapist to psychiatrist because anybody that would get close enough, he's a chameleon hid. So he would just back off and go to another one. So we were in this cycle and I just wanted to protect my kids. So I basically told him that he had to leave. You know, he went and stayed with his parents. I'm here with the kids. He's going like on and off, like back to the hospital, in and out. All of a sudden, he thought he was great. He was in that manic state. Put money down on an apartment that we didn't have, that he was closing out accounts. He had taken jewelry from me and pawned it. I didn't even know. So, I mean, some of those erratic behaviors that I never saw before were now coming out more. But in that, like, I'm like, but I believe I get married, you stay married, you make that commitment. So I was struggling. I'm like, I want him to be well. I need to protect my kids, but he's acting this way. So, I mean, we tried really hard. Like it basically culminated to right before, again, we come to these holidays, right before Christmas, where we talk. And like I said, hey, I want this to work. You need to get help, but you need to actually stay with a therapist. You need to work these things out. And I remember him asking me some questions like, will God forgive me? Like, does God forgive those that commit suicide? And I was just like, of course, I'm like, my heart is just like, well, I believe, of course he would, but let's talk like that. You know, let's think positive. And so getting the church people to come talk to him and pray with him and all of that stuff. But it's like he in his mind now looking back, he was tired. And I didn't catch it because I was so in it that I didn't catch it. So, and he had been in the hospital so often that usually he would take off the week and go with me and the kids down to South Florida to see my parents or family for Christmas. We would trade holidays with his family. But so here we are coming up into Christmas time. He couldn't take off. He had to work because he had no time off. So he's like, I'll stay back at the house. I will put our house in order, meaning like finish the flooring, fix stuff. So he was in like fix it mode in the house while I take the kids down. It's the last time I see him, or the last time the kids see him is we're pulling out of the garage. And he's telling them that he loves them. And I say, I love you. I hope you're well. I'll see you soon. So we drive down to South Florida, and again, love how God would send people. I remember I went into a store and then the stranger, always strangers. No, I never meet a stranger. They always become a friend. But sometimes God sends people to me too when I need it. And I remember this woman just sat down and said, basically acknowledged that I looked sad and was just asking me about it. And that made me think of my husband. And I'm like, I need to get in touch with him. So I just start calling him and it was just going to voicemail. I couldn't reach him. And this was like December. I'm trying to, so my mom's birthday is the 23rd of December. And I know we were celebrating her birthday that night. So it was December 23rd. I was calling, I couldn't reach him. So I'm like, okay, maybe he's just busy, he's working. And I put it out of my head. So we go back to where, the houses we're staying and we're going to celebrate my mom's birthday. They order food. And then I get a phone call and I recognize it as my husband's dad. So I'm like picking up my phone, like, hello. So I step in another room and I don't even remember the words that he said. All I know, he said that there's been an accident. Richie's been hurt. They call him Richie. He was airlifted to a hospital. I'm like, what is going on? I don't understand what's happening. What are you talking? It just wasn't registering. And so I still don't understand what's happening. And so I get off the phone with him. And then I start calling friends of mine that were up in the area where I lived. I said, and one of them had a house key. He said, can you please go check? I don't understand. I just got this call from his dad. Can you go check my house, see what's happening, what's going on? So a girlfriend of mine drove to where my house was and then was calling me and telling me that there was fire trucks, there was ambulances, there was like a helicopter that was going around. I'm like, what? What is happening? She goes, I don't understand. There's all these police there. I don't know what happened. And I'm like, okay, thank you. So then I get a phone call from the hospital. So they're trying to talk to me. And I'm like, so my mom's birthday is happening. I'm trying not to like worry everybody. My kids are running around 3 and 6. And I'm like on the phone. And the doctors are trying to explain to me the situation. And I'm listening to them. And it's still not hitting. I'm like, what? So basically they're telling me, we need to know what you would like for us to do. He's had 3rd-degree burns over like 90% of his body. I'm like, how did he, but Bart, what are you talking about? So I didn't know at the time all that he had done and all that he had taken, but they were telling me best case scenario, we can keep him under pain management. He'll be on life support or a ventilator in a nursing home for the rest of his life. Best case scenario, they said. They're like, do you want us to do that? I'm like, that sounds like a worst case scenario to me. And I'm still like in my head, I'm like, you're asking me to make this decision now. I'm hours away. And they're like, or do you just want us to make him comfortable and let him pass? And I'm like, what? And I haven't seen him yet. I haven't talked to him. My mom's out there, family. And I'm like, I have to tell them what's going on. My kids don't understand. At this time, it's December 23rd. And then my dad and my brother-in-law decide we're going to drive you up there. You have to see them. So I had a girlfriend of mine, a different girlfriend who's a nurse that agreed to go in and see my husband for me. Mm-hmm. And then she explained to me that he was in the burn unit. And then when she walked in, I don't think she told me that. And I learned more details later, but basically you could just smell the burning flesh. And that he had bandages all over him and that he was just on medication. That she couldn't really see him, but she just was there to hold his hand. And she wept with him. Mm-hmm. And that she told me she prayed over him and then was asking his forgiveness because, of course, my best friend took my side and all the trauma and all the stuff that had been going on. I'm so sorry I didn't notice and see the pain you were in. So as we're driving, so it's like a 3.5-hour drive to get up here. I was laying down trying to get rest, not making understanding. I told my kids there was an accident, mom will be back, don't worry. And so they were keeping the kids occupied. They didn't really know what happened. So I'm in the car and I feel God tell me, Abby, you need to forgive him. And I'm like, so I sit up in the seat, in the back seat, and in my head, I'm like, okay, I forgive you, Rich. I don't understand what's going on, but I forgive you. And as soon as I finished, I get a phone call from the nurse telling me that he just passed. Mm-hmm.
He had set himself on fire to take his life. Abby, we receive so many messages from people who ask that question he asked you. If I take my life, can I go to heaven? And I've been on the phone with a number of people and messaged even more. And some of them we've lost. And we have 800 numbers. If you're going through that, I'll just mention on our site at randyk.org, we have 3 of them under the contact page. There are 800 numbers with 24/7 counselors. You didn't know what was going on.
I didn't know.
And he had passed. Once again, the grace of God was sufficient to save him, even though his purpose could not be fulfilled in the future. But still we don't know what went on in his mind. But you were left with 2 children, a boy and a girl. What happened with them? How did you explain the situation and what was going on? They didn't see their father as he was, but they lost their father. How do you tell that to your children?
So at that point, after hearing that, we decided we still needed to go up because we needed to get some paper. I felt like I needed to still go up. They did tell me not to go in, so I never got to see him. My brother-in-law did go in just to confirm. We go to the house. So, and then where it all happened, right? So my brother-in-law went in first and he just started cleaning some stuff up. So I didn't have to see it. And he told me, Abby, when we go in the house, you just need to walk straight to your bedroom and then get the paperwork that you need. And I don't even know. So again, like paperwork, I'm like, so I don't even know where the stuff is. So basically, like only God and his grace and mercy for whatever I knew that I would need in the coming days. I just pull all these paperwork together, like birth certificates and, insurance information. Like this just happened and I'm getting this paperwork. But again, like I'm really good in, God has given me such grace in situations of significant trauma where I'm able to handle all this, and it's the after effect. When everybody else seems to be doing okay, that's where I have to sit with it. But in this moment, I'm in business mode. And it's like, I think that's a trait also. My mom always had that too, with my mom's had significant trauma and she's business mode. So I just business mode, get things done. But there was definitely, there was blood in the house. It cleaned up as best as possible. But again, I tried to just keep my eyes on where I needed to go. We went over to visit his dad because apparently when that news came, the mom had a heart attack. So my mother-in-law, hearing that her son had happened, she's now in a different hospital having a heart attack because of her son. So I'm sitting there with the dad, trying to kind of talk with him, make peace with it. And then we were only there for a little bit. And then we make that drive all the way back down to South Florida because now we're Christmas Eve at that point. So I get down there. And so I say, okay, Abby, hold it together. We're not going to tell the kids. We're going to give them a great Christmas because they deserve that. So I didn't say a word to them. So I held it in for Christmas Eve. I held it in for Christmas Day. And I just overly, whenever a gift was opened, he said, this is from your dad. He loves you so much. Look what he got you. And they were so young. They were only 3 and 6. They didn't think to say, can we call dad? And they didn't think to ask what happened. What was the accident? I just skirted it and just tried to give them the best possible Christmas that I knew that was the last Christmas they were going to have. That it was going to be like that. And then the day after Christmas, that's when I felt like, okay, I need to tell them individually. But what do I tell them? So the words that God gave me were different for the 3-year-old and then different for the 6-year-old. But ultimately what I told them, because I brought them up in the church, I believed that they were at church. We went to church all the time. So they knew about God. It wasn't a foreign thing to talk about God. So I said, you know how God gives us the breath of life? I said, Daddy's been struggling and he's had some sickness. He's been in the hospital. You guys know that. But just as God gives us the breath of life, God decided to take that breath of life back from your dad. So he's with God now in heaven. And so that's what I shared. I did not tell them for years, actually. I didn't tell them it was suicide. which looking back, I'm like, I could have done things differently. And again, for parents out there that might hear this, family members, it's like, how do you tell a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old what their dad did? Hindsight, I could have maybe done things differently, and if I could, but I didn't, so I had to deal with where I was. So I was a widow now with 2 little kids. Christmas ended, New Year's ended, and I had to come back home with my 2 kids into a home that used to be a place where their dad was. And my daughter was and so while this was happening, though, I had great friends at the church I was part of that got a hold of a company that specializes in, and I don't even know the formal words for it, but basically hazardous waste. So they'll go and clean up crime scene. So they came in and completely just cleaned the entire home and wiped it clean. Obviously some things had to be thrown away and moved. There was towels or blankets that weren't there. So wouldn't you know, as I walk into my home, my daughter goes, "Where's that?" She noticed it. Where's that carpet? Where'd the carpet go? And I'm like, oh, probably just doing some new things, just trying to avoid that. But she noticed, she would say things. But again, I just wanted to protect their little innocent minds. And so we ended up having kind of like, not a funeral, but obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but we did decide to do cremation after what had happened to his body. So we did kind of a celebration of life. And looking back, I wish I would have included my kids, but I had family saying, let's just keep, let's take them away. We'll just take them for the day so they don't have to hear everybody talking about the stuff. And so, to a day at Chuck E. Cheese to go play and just be there. I regret that. They deserve to be there to be able to say goodbye to their dad in that way. But for what I knew at that time, I did the best that I could. But then life happened, right? Everybody goes home. The cards stop coming. People say they care, but they don't really know how to walk alongside somebody that just had this horrific thing happen. So you'd think that would be it, right? So where I was working at the time, I was like, I can't do this. I have to be there for my kids. I didn't have my degree yet. I was in the middle of getting my master's degree. I decided to put that on hold, and I was going to leave work just so I could focus on my kids and be a mom to these little kids. And one of the clients that I worked for at this business marketing firm said, no, we would like to continue using you, but you can work from home. So I was able to work from home, make better money than I did working full time at this business. So God and his provision taking care of me and my kids. So I had a good season of being able to be home with the kids and just kind of focus on them and get them into grief counseling and, different things to provide support. But again, I was lonely. I felt alone, and I had thought that I had found that person, that prince, that longing for wanting to be loved. And how am I supposed to take care of these kids alone? So what do we do? Like, well, I need a father for them. And at the time, I didn't think that God the Father was like, I'm right here. But I thought I was looking for that earthly figure, that earthly, to fulfill the needs that I needed. But I hate to say this, but that could never replace their dad. But if I could put someone there that could love them, maybe it won't hurt as much for them, is what my thoughts were. Oh, I can't hear you. I think it's muted.
I would be surprised, Abby, if you didn't ask God, or maybe even be upset with God, with the question, where were you?
Yeah.
Where were you? Did that go through you were in a state of shock, obviously, or did that go through your mind?
Yeah. Yeah. But in that though, it's like, I can't explain it. People we haven't even gotten to my daughter part yet, but people ask me, how? Like, aren't you angry? And it's like, I trust me, there's moments, the screaming and the ugly crying. I don't understand. How could this happen? Where were you? I follow you. I'm doing all these things. I'm doing the right things. Where are you? And I'm helping these other families and, all these different things. And like, why is it that I can help them? And why can't people help all of those questions? But in all of that, I never turned away from him.
Mm.
The thought never even crossed my mind to turn away from him or to blame him. It was more hurt, like I was hurt, like I felt abandoned.
Going back earlier in your life, when Satan and the demons that were coming against you thought that you would reject God, like Job,
Right.
and God basically knew that you wouldn't, eventually that you wouldn't. And so you were faithful even through that. But the trials would, even though you were, again, very accomplished and you were in the field
Yeah.
of helping people with mental illness, but your children were growing up and the mental illness, whether it was a carryover from what your husband had, or, but it was passed on then to your daughter, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
she was 6 when her dad died. So she had more memories of her dad. My son, now 19, doesn't have those memories. But so little, I did end up so not to like, but basically I did end up getting remarried. And so he came into their life and just loved them as his own. At that point, my daughter was going to be turning 7 and my son was turning 4. So it wasn't long after. Was it too quick? Maybe. I don't know. But whatever it is, it was what it was. And I love my husband. Now we've gone through a lot of trials also in our marriage and our relationship. So it's not the Brady Bunch. I know you mentioned that earlier. My idea of what the Brady Bunch would be is I thought, if you think, okay, well, he's loving me. He wanted to marry me. Again, like, who wants to marry, this woman that just lost her husband and then has these 2 little kids full time? Like, wow. Right. Like, okay. So of course I'm like, yes, my kids will have a dad. I will have a husband again. So I never really allowed myself to fully grieve that I just had that horrific thing happen.
mm,
I just wanted to like push it aside and start my life over. And what do? You move again. So
mm,
we move right into this beautiful home. He has 2 kids of his own. So I've got 2 kids. Both of our daughters have the same name, just spelled differently. We're like, oh, how cool is that?
mm,
No. And it started off okay. It started off okay. But my kids were with us full time and his kids were with us part time because their mom was still alive and it was, custody. So it started to be a little jealousy factors maybe in there, understandably. I mean, because there's wounds also that I recognize that his kids must have had because their dad remarried and now has these other 2 kids that are calling him dad, right? Because that's what, like, you can call him dad, and he wanted that. I kept the same last name as my kids. I didn't change my last name when getting remarried because our plan was that he would adopt them and then we'd all change our name together. That was our plan. That never happened.
mm.
And that's a significant marker, I think, as well. Looking back. And I'm just being vulnerable here. I'm sharing so much here that, like, it's not about me. My whole thing and why I'm sharing this is because if anybody can make a decision or make a choice, and not have to go through the stuff that I've gone through, I would do it all over again for them to save their soul.
Mm.
So that's like my whole hope. And I can't worry about any backlash. I can't worry about what man will say because I just want my God to say, well done, good and faithful servant.
Mm.
All I want.
You were one of the bravest people I've ever met, but you have truly that heart after God that few would have. I can see now why God would have so much trust in you,
Oh,
would have so much trust. You're saving a lot of people right now. We're crying with you, and the reason I had earlier, I put this on mute because I was crying myself, but At some point, you deserve a break. At some point, you deserve a break.
Yeah.
And going to a theme park or something like that's not going to get it. But where's the break? Because there's another break in the seemingly, well, the negative direction that is coming your way.
Yeah.
It seems like you have no respite at this point because you're going to discover that your beautiful daughter, and we're showing a picture of you with her, your beautiful daughter would grow up and she would struggle.
Yeah. So probably when she was about 14. So years have gone by now, right? So ups and downs, gone on lots of vacations, a beautiful life we've had, like trying to fill all of those needs for her to make sure her and my son have this beautiful life. But she was still that heart, that woundedness that she had longing for her father. Even though now she has this man in her life that was trying to be that for her, wasn't her dad, and then um, her own insecurities, again, like the parallels between her and I. She was tall, lanky, skinny, braces, like buck teeth, like all this stuff, like growing up. So kids were mean, right? But she was such a sweet girl. And so she was so smart too. And so she was into sports also. So all the parallels. And I'm just like, I can't let what happened to me happen to her. So I made sure she had all the opportunities, everything in there. You're so beautiful. You're amazing. Always trying to be in tune with what was happening with her, trying to talk with her. And then, but I remember even conversations with her, like in her anger, she would say, you have all this time for all these other families and people you work with. What about yours? And that it hurt because it's like, I spent so much time. I was always there with her, I was always pouring into. And I believe now that the enemy was using that pain to get at me, to stop me. Because there was times I thought about quitting my job. Like, okay, let me just focus and just be here. But like helicopter parent, like all up in there. And I would have in a heartbeat if that's what I felt God wanted me to do. But like, I was trying to balance it all. I was trying to be a good wife, a good mom, you know, use the gifts and talents that God gave me to help save other families. Watch, and that was happening. Families were being reunited just by me being present with them. I had no special talent to do that, but I shared Jesus with them. So to hear those things and watch my daughter and suffer, but again, she was really good at hiding stuff too. She was on a roll, National Honor Society, great at sports, didn't show emotion, won't show the tears, really tough. And I should have known, now looking back, I'm like, I should have known. I should have seen, I should have recognized. Obviously, I had to work through a lot of guilt and shame and processing that and allowing the Holy Spirit to bring healing. And I'm saying all this because I know there's other parents out there that are feeling and thinking those same things. And I just want them to know that there's hope and that God loves them and that there's purpose and there's a plan, and the enemy is lying to them to make them think that that's it for them. So I just wanted to put that there as well. But I started to get phone calls from teachers telling me that my daughter Kaylee was saying things like, I just want to die, and just like comment. So I was like, I have to tell them, I have to tell her the truth about her dad. So at 14, again, I did it individually because 14, and then my son was 11. I told him separately, but I didn't share the fire part, but what I hadn't shared is what I found out after coming home. He did have his Bible open, so he was seeking God in those last moments. But online, I found the history of the computer. He was finding websites that can show you how to kill yourself. So he had tried taking pills. He had, so I found razor blades. He tried cutting himself. He even tried carbon monoxide. I found the tubing and the instructions that he tried to do carbon monoxide with the truck. And then ultimately he ingested gasoline and lit himself on fire. So that's how my husband finally passed. And I believe that either it was the pain or he changed his mind and he didn't want that to happen. And the only reason our house didn't burn down is that he ran in the house and called 911 and screamed for help. And so that's how the ambulance and the fire truck and the helicopter and all that came to the home. And they thought it was a woman because they said in his pain he sounded like a woman. And the reason they burst into the house is they saw the swing set and everything outside. So they thought that something was going to happen to kids in the house. So like it's God, even in his grace and mercy in that, didn't allow my husband to die at the house and didn't allow our house to burn down in that moment. So I was not going to be telling my kids that their dad did that. But I did tell them that he had bipolar and that he had taken a lot of pills and that when he was younger, he did try to cut his wrist. And I believe that he tried to do it that night too. I said, because of the bipolar. And I explained to my daughter, so you can't be saying things like that you want to die or that you just can't live. And if you mean it, then let's talk about it. Let's get help. But just saying it flippantly, because kids would just say all the time, I just want to die, just kill myself, like constantly. And so I said, no, because your dad did, that was his struggle. So then that opened up its own other set, because then my daughter was like, well, why wasn't I good enough? Why did my dad do this? Why didn't we make him happy? So she was longing again for that father love. And then that gawky, gangly, pubescent teenager turned into a beautiful butterfly. And that's when the boys started to pay attention to her. And just like me in high school, where all of a sudden the attention was there, she soaked it up. And the enemy just latched onto that. And just like I was sexually assaulted, she was sexually assaulted. She was actually raped on campus at the school that she attended. But we didn't know until a year later because she kept it quiet because she was afraid of what would happen until he graduated high school. But the behaviors, all of a sudden, we were seeing different behaviors. Like she was in dual enrollment, honor society. All of a sudden, grades were failing. The music, the rap music, she got attached, started getting tattoos and just like, see, I didn't know what happened yet. So in my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this must be bipolar, right? Because the behaviors, the ups and the downs and lashing out and all of this. But whether it was, I don't want to be quick to assign mental illness. She definitely had mental struggles and then all these medications that were poured on top of her. But it was that woundedness, that little girl that was longing for the father's love and seeking it in all the places like I sought it and not finding it. Just trauma after trauma of what happened to her. One boy then did something and recorded her and she didn't know and then airdropped it. And I don't know if you know what airdropped. I had to learn all about that to the entire school. So the entire school. So then there's that embarrassment and that shame and then blaming her, like all the teachers and the football players. So, I mean, but she was tough. She daily went to school and she kept going. And she was holding it together all the while on the inside. She was breaking apart. And I didn't know at the time. That's when she started to smoke weed, drink. And then people started to introduce her to Percocet, the pain pill.
Yes. There's oftentimes, isn't there, Abby, a mix of the spiritual dynamic of what's going on with mental illness as well as the psychiatric aspect of it. The two seem to be commingled to some extent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so she had this open door, if you will, that to now with the drugs on top of that, or the alcohol, and the traumatic, of being raped and all of these things going on. In a sense, it was almost a replay. It must have gone through your mind of, I can empathize entirely with what my daughter was going through, but yet there was on top of that, there was this mental illness also.
Yeah, and then her growing up with a mom as a therapist, both my kids had plenty of therapy. She was more open. My son definitely was not, but nothing was really helping. And then that made me not angry with God, but God, like, why can't like? And then I tried to like I wanted if I can help these other families, I tried to pour into, but you can't be a therapist to your own children. They say like the prophets without honor in their own home. You can't be a therapist to your own children. And so I was trying to find the balance between okay, being mom, but also probably over or enabling some things because I didn't want the woundedness for them. Their father, what happened with there, and then now this happening to her. So wanting to be a friend, wanting to love, but again, also like, no, you can't. So very strict, but at the same time, like I didn't know where to turn. And even trying to turn to help with a therapist at the school or other outside therapists, or even turning to the church, not really getting the support from the church, that I was hoping for, just to love on my daughter, because on the outside, there's this girl that was acting sporadic, tattoos, cursing, yelling into the rap culture at this point. For all accounts, mean and nasty, but that wasn't really, I saw the little girl inside.
Mm-hmm.
But she had this, like, whereas mine, I had the facade, but I was always like, let me help people. So mine was more of like the kindness and the love. And for all that, hers was nobody's ever going to hurt me again. And so hers was more the other extreme of, well, I'm going to hurt them before they hurt me. Okay, well, I'm just going to have sex all the time. Then nobody's going to hurt me or rape me because I'm going to be in control. So hers went to the other extreme. And so we tried Baker Acts with her, even though those don't help, like the mental facilities. I'm like, here we go again. I tried, even putting her in a residential home, for troubled teen, but that wasn't helping. I mean, I was desperate to try anything, not because I didn't want her with me. I didn't want her to go down this path that I was watching happen. Meanwhile, her brother, who's only 3 years younger, is watching it all happen. And I didn't even realize I missed it, that he was trying to cope in the best way he could. And he started smoking marijuana as well. So he starts using substances to cope and numb while watching all this crazy behavior, let's just call it. It seemed crazy on the outside, but torment, demonic. Because I think she had the same giftings as I did. She was very sensitive. All of her friends would always come to her and she was like, Mom, I feel like I'm their therapist, but that nobody ever really asked her how she was doing. And that she also just was like, I'm fine, and pushed it away. I believe that she also sensed and saw things, but didn't really want to talk about it because, I mean, she was at this point only 16, 17, not even 18 yet. Like seeing that, like I'm thinking back now, like I'm 21 and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? But at that age, how do you explain that? And so she thought she was going crazy too. So what happens when you think you're going crazy? You go to a psychiatrist and you get all these medications that basically numb you out like a zombie. So she was a zombie for a couple of years. And then self-medicating on the side with whatever pills that she was getting that I had no idea about.
The medical field does not fully understand how to treat mental illness. It's almost looking for that magic cocktail. It's somewhat of a guessing game to some extent. And so she was at this point either addicted to or she had been taking Percocet, which is a prescription drug. But now we have this epidemic of fentanyl use. So we have young people dying. We've had interviews not with them, but with their loved ones who have lost their loved one to fentanyl. And she had been going through these struggles, had a gifting that you had in your youth. What was her? She went to church. Church wasn't. Didn't know how to affect her in a way that she needed. What did she think of God at this point?
So she got so, and I guess I didn't even explain some of even what I got into when I was seeking God and seeking answers before knowing God. You know, we look at um, horoscopes, we look at New Age, we
Hmm.
look at spirituality. So she kind of went down that path as well. Like she
Hmm.
wouldn't deny God, but she was like all these books and the movies and little talismans, which I've now gone through her room and gotten rid of all of those things. But crystals. So she was seeking as well and all that. But like,
Hmm.
again, how could a God hurt me like this? How could a God
Hmm.
take my dad away from me?
Hmm.
I never heard her renounce God. She still was like, Mom, I want to go to church. And so um, probably July before we get to when she passed, she's like, all of a sudden this church pops up. And I say pops up because we have been going to this one Baptist church for probably a good 10 to 12 years. I ended up making the decision to leave that church because I'm very open. As you can see, I'm very, it's just here it is, open, bold, vulnerable. And not everybody respects that. And sometimes people use that against you. And that can happen in the church as well. So, in
Hmm.
seeking counsel and support from the church, basically, we felt turned away, that sorry, we can't help you. And so I'm like, what? So, I was seeking different churches, trying to go wherever I could. But then all of a sudden, I see this one church. It seemed like it popped up out of nowhere, but it was always there. It was just, it wasn't the right time. And I told my daughter, hey, let's go try this church. So we went there the first day. It was my first time going to a charismatic or Pentecostal church. But I loved it because it's like I don't know, I just felt there was a freedom there. And she loved it. And then she started asking me about God. And I started sharing with her about, very, very vulnerable, honest about my walk with God. And I had just started getting back into the reading the Bible again because with all this trauma going on, it's not that I didn't want to be close to God, but it's very subtle how you're pulled away on focusing so much on the problem or an issue that you don't even think about spending time with God. It's more about, let me fix this, let me fix this, let me get that. So at this point, I couldn't even tell you the last time I had opened up my Bible. And that makes me so sad because now every day I feel empty without his word, but I hadn't been reading it. So she and I went on this journey together and I started teaching her and I gave her a new Bible and then the Psalms, how David just would cry out and the anxiety and the depression and all the stuff that happened to David. And I have text messages with her, which I'm going to cherish for my entire life, even though we're like, can't people just talk? But even in these conversations, like if I were to just talk with her like these things, I wouldn't have any memory. I wouldn't have any recollect. Like I'm so grateful for the text messages because she would pour out her heart to me in a text message. So I have all these things of where I would share the gospel with her. I would share Jesus with her. And she thanked me and was telling me that I'm the reason she has strength because I've taught her to focus on God and that thank you for telling me about the Psalms. So I have all of these. I have it. I have them all in my phone, um, which is such a gift because I can see even up to her last moment, I was always pointing her to Jesus and she was seeking him. And I have her Bible where she wrote in there, and I've got scripture verses that she wrote down. Devil, you cannot have me. I belong to God. So even she was battling these demons like I was, and she was fighting and crying out to God, saying, no, you can't have me, devil. And so this church that we had found that she was like, okay, Mom, I want to keep going. So she would come with me. I had no idea still about, I did not know about the fentanyl, the Percocet that had laced with fentanyl, these fake pills, until all of a sudden everything kind of erupted. So we started going to that church, probably August into September is where I started getting more information. And her brother, of all people, called me one night because he wasn't with us at the time for other situations we had in the home. It just wasn't healthy or good. And he called me screaming, how could you let this happen to her? You need to get her. This is where she is. This is what she said. I'm like, what? It's like my whole, like, how did I miss this whole world? So, and I'm going to share again something here that's very vulnerable. I won't name names, but I think it's important to put here. I learned that somebody that she had looked up to that was significantly older than her, that was a martial arts instructor for her when she was a child from, say, 8, up to her teenage years that she looked up to. Basically, once she had turned 18, had started messaging her And then when she had turned 20, I learned that they began a sexual relationship and that he was also one that gave her drugs.
Mm. Oh my.
So I found all this out on a phone call with my son screaming at me. Not screaming at me, just more like, help her, save her. So that's when I went into a tailspin, just running out of my house. I had no shoes on, again, no shoes, but in my car trying to find her, to pull her away from this evil person. I was able to get her home. She thought that he loved her. She believed that this person loved her and that she was suicidal. She just wanted to kill herself because she thought, you don't understand. He loves me. I'm like, I do understand. He was lying to you. He's a deceiver. But she wasn't ready to hear that, and her woundedness and then her drug addiction that I'm now learning about. So of course, I'm like, we got to get you into rehab. So that's when, as soon as I knew, I was on it and I was seeking out and I got great recommendations and I work in a hospital. I do mental health. The places we would refer people. So I'm like, okay, we got this. So I thought that we were making the best decision to put her into this rehab facility, which ended up being a terrible situation, because even there at this rehab facility, they didn't have the support or the help that she had wanted. She wanted the therapy. She did not want to be addicted. She wanted to be healed, but they never gave her the therapy. She was only there a month. It turns out I have evidence also in a journal that she wrote, and I've learned after that there was a man, 40 years old, a patient there, that took advantage of her while she was at the rehab.
Mm. Oh my.
And so where were the people that were supposed to monitor and take care of my daughter? So she's there trying to seek help. This happens. She gets out on a Monday. I'm at work, learning about trauma-informed care, right? So I'm here training and getting this training. My daughter's home, and I'm like, okay, trying to find balance, trying to figure out how to do tough love, right? Because I don't want to be codependent, because that's what they were telling me in this place. You're codependent. She needs to be on her feet. What's the balance? God help me. Then all of a sudden, she thought she'd have external therapy through the program. They told her she didn't qualify because she was discharged prematurely. She was discharged prematurely because they didn't want to deal with her or with the situation, and she was crying out for help. So here on a Monday, she gets out of this program. She's told that you no longer qualify for telehealth, the group therapy. So now she's out of there. She has no therapist. She's been clean for 30 days, so her system is clean, and she relapses, and I didn't know. So I think she relapsed. She was going to all these meetings at night, and I missed it. And then one night she went to go see that 40-year-old man and thought, okay, I'm going to go see him. He cares about me. And then she ended up getting in a car accident that night. And as soon as he saw the accident, he took off. So he abandoned her. She calls me. I'm so grateful I picked up the phone and I was able to walk her through, and she was okay, and stay with the police and just walk her through. She's a whole city away. Stayed up, waited for her. It wasn't her fault. She comes home, she was hungry. She had stopped by to get Chipotle and was so excited to tell me that she used to work there. They gave her a free meal. So she had her free meal. She was not high. She was actually, I didn't know at the time again that she relapsed, but she seemed steady. She was talking to my husband about this crazy lady that was basically blaming her for the accident, but she was tired. She was going to eat her food and go to bed. And then she came in and I hugged her. I was tired too. And I said, honey, we'll take care of the car in the morning. Don't worry. And so it was a mess. And so I said, don't worry about it. Just go to bed, get rest. We'll talk in the morning. I have my therapy appointment, that was Friday night. Saturday, I have a therapy appointment. I said, after the therapy appointment, we'll take care of it. So that was the last time I saw my daughter alive.
So there was a Percocet that was laced with fentanyl.
So what we then learned, because getting into the phone was a whole other thing too. But so then the next morning, I sent her a text, because she's upstairs. Please do text. I'm going to go to my therapy. Don't worry, I'll come back. It was turning, for iPhones, it goes blue, which means, she got it. So I took pictures of the car, but then as I was leaving to go to therapy, the messages started to turn green. So I'm like, okay, maybe her phone died. So I told my husband, hey, before you leave, just can you go up and make sure she's up? I'm going to go to my therapy. I'll see you later. So that's all that's going on. And I go to therapy and we're sitting down and I'm telling my therapist, who's also a former addict, he's also a chaplain, he's also a man of God, uses the Bible for therapy. So he knows, I've seen him maybe like 4 or 5 times. So he knows my story, my kid's story. So I remember drinking a sip of water, saying this accident happened, but at least she's okay. And I put the water down. And all of a sudden he takes out the Bible and then he starts opening from the book of Job and starts reading. And in place of Job's name, he starts saying my name. And I'm like, why is he reading this? Like, this is weird. But he just felt led to start reading it. And so as he's reading it, and then he shuts it, like he was talking about how basically, like you said, that Satan got permission from God to test Job. But he kept saying Abby's name, Abby, shuts the Bible, and my phone rings. And it's a friend of mine saying, you need to call Rick. You need to call your husband. You need to call Sean right now. And I'm like, why? What's going on? Is everything okay? Is he okay? I don't know what's going on. You need to call him. So I'm like, okay. So I call and I don't reach him. And I'm like, what's going on? And then when I'm calling. And I finally reach him. And I don't even know. Like he was just like, you need to come home. I'm like, you need to tell me right now what's going on. And I made him tell me. He didn't want to tell me. And I didn't understand when he was saying, Kaylee's gone. And I'm like, what do you mean she's gone? She's not there? Did she run off? Like, what? And then he starts crying. And like this cry that I don't think I've ever heard from him before. And I'm like, I don't understand. He's like, the paramedics are here. I'm like, well, tell them to try again. No, that's not possible. Tell them to try again. Check for her breath. See if we have Narcan. Maybe she took something. Is there anything there? Like in my mind, like, now I'm not there. And I'm sitting here across from my therapist. I'm in like shock. And I'm like, what's happening? And I don't even know how I ended the call with him. He wanted to come pick me up. I was like 45 minutes from home. He wanted to pick me up. I said, no. I had all these people saying, let me come pick you up. No. And then the therapist had another appointment, but he's like, you could go sit in this other office for now. So I go sit in this other office and I start calling my parents, my sister who lives in Africa. I'm like, all these people. And it's like, I'm talking, but it's not registering because I still haven't seen her. It's not real. This isn't real. And so all my coworkers are therapists too. And they're like, what? And so they're crying. I'm like, why are you crying? This isn't real. It's not like my voice. I make the decision to drive home. 45 minutes. Shocked and numb. Driving home. I was safe. I pull into the neighborhood. And I knew that it's pulling into my neighborhood at this time. It was changed forever. I was never going to pull into the neighborhood again and see my daughter. So as I'm pulling into the neighborhood to get to my house, I see police cars, and they have like crime scene tape on my front door, and my husband's out there, and I'm like, he tries to hug me. I did not want to be hugged. I'm like, no, I just want to see her. And they told me I couldn't see her, that they needed to have the medical examiner come, which seemed to take like an hour. Probably wasn't an hour. It seemed like that. And I just like, I have to tell my son, he doesn't know. So something about what was going on with my son and I at that point is there was a lot of trauma between us and a lot of anger and hurt. And he didn't know. He knew his sister was at rehab. And I'm so grateful that before she went to rehab, they reconciled and they had one last day where they were able to spend the day. And then she sent me a picture. I'll send it to you after, but she sent me a picture of them smiling together in her car the day that she was leaving to go into rehab. And so they had that connection. And so that is something that I know he needed, I needed, just we all needed. But here I was on the phone trying to be like how my husband was trying to get me to come over and home without telling me. I'm trying to tell my son, hey, I need you to come over, just come home. He's like, what's going on? What's wrong? I'm like, it's Kaylee. He's like, oh, did she get arrested? This and that. So that's where his head was. I'm like, no, it's nothing like that. Just, you need to come over. And some background on my son and I, like he literally thought he wasn't going to come. He thought that I was setting him up, that there was going to be police there to take him. I don't know why. Like he just, whatever his was. And his roommate at the time called me and said, "You need to tell me what's going on because he's like doesn't know what's going on." Like, and I said, "Okay." So I get my son on the phone and I have to tell him same thing. Like Kaylee's gone. And those words though, did she leave? Where'd she go? I'm like, no, she's not alive anymore. I haven't seen her, but I need you to come to the house. So that's how my son came and he just hugged me. And so he didn't get to see her either. The ME did end up coming, went upstairs and said, "I will check to see if it's okay for you to see her." She comes down and says, I would rather you see and remember your daughter the way that you knew her. You don't need to be seeing her like this. So I didn't get to, when they brought her down, they had a blanket over her and I just got to pray with her and just kind of hold her hand over the blanket. And it just didn't seem real. I'm like, what? Like I could feel her feet. She's there. The chaplain had come to my house, who I'm so close with. I'm close with the hospital I work at. I work very closely with the chaplains there. So one of them had come to the house to just be with me and my family. And so he said a prayer. And then they took her. And then all of a sudden people just start showing up at my house and just, they're grieving and I'm sitting there and I'm numb. My parents end up driving out from South Florida. So they're there. And all of a sudden it's like all these people are there and like, it just didn't seem real. I'm like, how is this happening? How am I don't say in this situation again, because it's different when it's your kid. And I just saw her the night before. I didn't understand.
This beautiful daughter of yours today is in heaven. She has no illness, no worries. And that doesn't wholly detract from the sadness, from the grief, the attempt at some reconciliation. And you are a mental health therapist. Physician, heal thyself. And it's more than an irony that this is your specialty.
Yeah.
And you found yourself at the effect of what you have helped to heal countless number of people of. I ask you now, Abby, to speak to those who have lost a loved one, who have, in your own counseling experience as a grieving mother, experience as a traumatized and grieving wife, speak to them when they ask the question, where's God in all of this? I've prayed and he doesn't seem to hear me. I'm in pain and he allows me to be this way. Speak to them for a moment, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I have verses as well that I will share, but what I would tell them is that God can handle it, that he already knows what they feel. If they need to scream it out, he can handle that he loves them, that we're in a fallen world, that we're in a sinful world. This is not our forever home. It wounds him and hurts his heart just as much, like more. Like my daughter was my daughter, but she was lent to me. She was entrusted to my care. That's his daughter. So when that happened to Kaylee, when it happened to my first husband, that happened to God. That God actually weeps with us and is sad with us, and that just to be real, to allow the feelings, to allow the emotions, to not stuff it down because it's going to come back up. It's going to come back up. And that the enemy can hold on to that bitterness and that resentment and that hurt and torture us, like literally torture us with, we should have done this, we could have done that. But God says, no. He's like, you need to allow me to bring in the healing and love you for where you are. And that's what he wants to do for all of these parents, the siblings. He wants to do that for my son. You know, he's doing it in me. And as I'm able to talk and meet with other families, I've met countless other moms that have also lost their child to fentanyl. Nobody wants to be part of that club or that group, but we're so grateful that we're not alone. And so to not be ashamed to speak out and say they need help, to speak very openly with their kids. I've been able to speak now at some churches, and I'm going to be doing more, some older crowds as well, so that they can be like, because some grandparents are like, how could I help my grandkid? Like, I'm seeing this happen. I just want them to understand that we can't fix them. We need to love them. We need to meet them where they're at. We need to just be present and listen and allow God in and allow God to kind of just share life and truth and to be vulnerable and seek help. You know, I wish I would love to say that there's so many great therapists that are spirit led. And that's the key part there. All of my degrees, my certifications mean nothing without Jesus, without the love of God. And I would never venture to say that I'm an expert in any of it. I just happen to have lived through it because Jesus has helped me.
You have a voice that is more powerful than 99% or whatever of people, because you've experienced all of these. And certainly people can, or you can get in touch with the audience I'm speaking to right now with randyk.org contact page if you want a message to Abby. But if I ask you for contact for therapy, Abby, you're going to have a preponderance of people contacting you for therapy. So I'm going to leave it to you as to any suggestions you would have for those that would like to enter into some into therapy for their current situation.
What's funny is that actually this morning before coming and doing this with you, I have the blessing of being asked to be a board member for a friend who I've just met within the last month that's also lost a son to fentanyl, but is starting this ministry for women coming out of the prison system or jailed and trying to help them with having a positive life and the drug addiction, but just trying to really minister. So I'm sitting at this table about to have this happen, and one of the board members turns to me and said, I've heard about you. I've heard you're a therapist. And she began to say, are you taking new patients? Or, are you seeing new people? And as I'm about to say, no, I'm not seeing people in private practice, I felt the Holy Spirit say, Abby. And so I was like, oh, I said, and it was like, it hit me. And it's like, while my job and my ministry and my position is at a hospital, the work that I do there is not private practice. It's basically ministering to the nurses and the doctors and people who work in the hospital. So just basically loving on them, which is beautiful. And that's my job per se. That God said, Abby, I've given you a platform and your ministry is going to be helping these families, helping. And I'm just like, so as he's saying this to me, I say to this girl, I said, you know what? I believe it's supposed to be a ministry. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I believe I'm not taking on new clients because I'm going to be opening up a platform to minister to hurting people. So not a job, not like it's therapy, but just a mom who's been through it and that just wants to love on people and show that there's hope. So whatever that looks like. So while we were preparing for this, my husband's home making a new email for me. Years ago, when I first got remarried, been married now 14 years, when I first got married, he's like, you're going to have a ministry and I want to go ahead and get the website. So he's already he's been paying for this website for all these years that I haven't even used. And it's called Your Healing Heart. And God said, that's what I put in you, Abby. And that's how you're going to help people. So he's setting up the website. He's setting up all this stuff with email. So God is going to open up the doors the way he sees fit. Part of that, I also want to be able to be very real about this fentanyl and what parents should look for, because it wasn't just a pill. I believe that somebody gave her pure fentanyl, and that's why she died instantly. It could happen just once. But I want parents to know what to look for, the signs that I missed, just that's what I want to use the platform for, is just to be able to be real and put it all out there. Not worried about what man's going to say, but I'm going to put it out there and I'll answer honestly any questions people have. We even have the 911 call that's on a recording of my husband calling the police after finding my daughter. So I haven't listened to it, but my husband said, I think we're going to need to have that for one day. We're going to be sharing that with families and with kids that don't think that their occasional drug use can impact a family.
Well, we want to help you in promoting, I say promoting is the wrong word, but in sharing that ministry that is you're developing right now. So we'll be posting, that information to you as it is developed by this wonderful, wonderful friend of ours, Abby, and with her husband. So if you go to randyk.org, we'll keep you posted, and also on the website as well about that on the forthcoming ministry. Again, I say that if you do have an urgent need to talk with somebody, we do have in the contact page, we have 3 ministries that we've partnered with that have 800 numbers with 24/7 people at the other end of the line that you can speak with. I know a number of people contact me. I try to get in touch with as many. We have a counseling team as well on this end, but you can well imagine with the sheer numbers, we try to triage the most urgent ones, but I would encourage you, if you really need to talk with somebody, go to those 800 lines. There are people that with whom you can talk. Abby, thank you so much. Your courage is absolutely, I'm speechless as to your courage in sharing this. I know a lot of people have been healed through this and just listening to you. But now I'm going to give you the opportunity to pray for our audience. I know the Holy Spirit, you have that warmness in your heart for them. I know the Holy Spirit's giving you the exact words that people need right now in listening to this, as their hearts are open to the Lord at this moment. So would you be kind enough to pray for our audience, please?
Yeah. And can I also share some scriptures first? Because I feel these are ones that he gave me to share with the audience.
Please.
So Genesis 50:20, you intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Philippians 4:13, I can endure all these things through Christ who strengthens me. Psalm 91:11, for he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. And then this one is the final one he gave me to share today. Romans 8:38 and 39. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, nor their height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. That's how I'm standing. And that's how I want others to know that they can stand too if they've got Jesus. And it would be an honor to say prayers.
Thank you so much for sharing those wonderful scriptures.
Yeah.
Please.
Father God, I'm just so humbled and blessed and honored. You led me to watch Randy Kay and start seeking answers after my daughter died. She died just 7 months ago. And in that time, the healing that you've allowed in my heart and my life and using ministries like Randy's, and the stories that I've heard people share, the vulnerability that you've allowed for them to come on air and share things that are so hard to share gave me the boldness and confidence to know that you wanted me to do the same. So I first just want to just acknowledge and thank Randy and Renee and their ministry for their heart and their compassion and for putting you first. And for all the people who have shared their testimonies and that will continue to share. The enemy does not want us to share. He wants us to be in darkness and in isolation. And we need to battle that. And it's not our battle, it's the Lord's battle. So here I am, a broken vessel, allowing you, God, to shine your light through me so that it can touch the lives of those that are watching now and that will watch and listen for, I believe, years to come. So whatever your will is, I pray that you would bring healing into all of these lives. I pray that there would be restoration of families, that you would break off those spirits of addiction, of depression, of anxiety, that you would break off those spirits of suicide, of homicide, of depression, that you would silence the enemy, that there would be power and authority. I feel your presence now, and I know that people listening are going to feel your Holy Spirit in that presence, that we have authority as children of God, that the enemy's already been defeated, that we give power to the enemy when we start to doubt, when we doubt God, when we say we're not enough, when we try to give up. That's the enemy. We need to say, no, not today, Satan. Yes to Jesus. And that you, Lord, would fulfill your calling and your destiny, that you would share Kaylee through me, that my late husband, Rich, would have his story shared, that families for generations to come would be able to say, if God can stand with her and she's still standing, I can do it too, because it's because of your love in Jesus. So we give you the glory and we just claim souls for the kingdom of God immediately now, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Beautiful prayer. Beautiful prayer. Well, I've got to go off and pray myself. This was very emotional. I've been trying to hold it in. So anyway, all right. So we'll end with this, with a thank you to you, Abby, again, for this heart-rendering, to say the very least, account. And also, we have some great news for you, which is, if you know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and if you don't, we give you that opportunity right now. There's no promise of it tomorrow or the next minute. And just pray, dear Jesus, I know that you sacrificed yourself on the cross for me. I can't possibly measure up. But Lord, you have taken my sins. If only I would ask for your forgiveness. Forgive me, Lord, and become Lord of my life, so that I might rejoice in you on that day that I go to heaven. And guide me with your Holy Spirit all the days of my life, so that I might serve you faithfully. And I pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. There's a celebration going on in heaven right now for you. If you prayed that prayer, the celebration is enjoined by Abby's beloved family members and daughter who are there right now, rejoicing with you. And we have others that we know who are there also. So we finish with this, and that is, if you are now in Christ Jesus, be of good cheer, because heaven is in your future. Take care, and God bless. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe. And if you'd like further information, go to our website at randyk.org, where our mission is simple: to share the great news of God's love.